Nancy Drew Mystery Stories. The Clue of the Black Keys. Chapter 1. An Urgent Request. Nancy Drew's eyes sparkled as she and Bess Marvin stepped from the afternoon plane. "Wasn't it a grand weekend in New York?" Nancy said. "But it's good to be back in River Heights. There's your mother, Bess." Miss Marvin kissed the girls and offered Nancy a ride home. "Thank you," she answered, "but I left my car here." As a slender, tighten-haired girl walked toward the lot with her small suitcase, a young man in a gray topcoat signaled her to wait. His worried look and urgency of his pace gave Nancy the feeling something was wrong. "You are Miss Nancy Drew?" he asked. When she nodded, he said, "Your father is Dad? Is something the matter?" Nancy interrupted fearfully. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to frighten you. Your father is all right, but I'm concerned about your friend," the stranger went on. "I consulted your father about him this morning. Mr. Drew said my case sounded more like a mystery for a detective than for a lawyer." Nancy studied the eager young man. He was not more than 25, tall and attractive, with serious blue eyes and reddish hair. "Perhaps I should introduce myself," he said. "My name is Scott, Terrence. Scott, but my friends call me Terry. I'm on the faculty of Keystone University. You may think it's strange my coming to meet you here, but when I learned you were clever at solving mysteries—" I'll do what I can," Nancy promised. Though still in her teens, Nancy had earned a reputation as a clever sleuth. "It's quite comfortable in the waiting room," she said. "Suppose we go in there and you tell me your story." As soon as she had locked her suitcase in her car, they found a scheduled bench in the main building beyond a group of waiting passengers. Terry Scott removed his top coat, folded it, and placed it on the bench between them. "The story," he said, "begins in Mexico. I was with a group of professors working there last summer to unravel an ancient mystery. Our search led us to an unexpected area where we planned to dig for treasure." "Yes," Nancy said, her interest aroused. "According to the old legend, something of great benefit to mankind is secreted with the treasure. We professors, Dr. Gramhon, Dr. Pitt, Dr. Anderson, and myself, are all interested in finding out what this is as we are finding the treasure." "You have no idea what it is?" Nancy asked. "No. After weeks of excavating, Dr. Pitt and I came across a clue which the four of us were sure would lead to the treasure." Terry Scott leaned forward, his face tense. It was a stone tablet. "We knew at once that all we needed to do was translate the cipher on it, and the secret would be ours. But then something terrible happened." "What?" "The night the day of our find, Dr. Pitt and the stone tablet disappeared." "He stole it?" Nancy asked, shocked. Terry Scott frowned. "I don't know. Dr. Pitt was pretty secretive. He is a bachelor and close-mouthed about his work, but he's a fine teacher. All the professors would swear he's honest." "Perhaps he was the victim of some foul play," Nancy suggested. "Did you call in the police?" "Yes, they haven't turned up a thing, but I feel that Dr. Pitt is alive, being held captive somewhere." Terry Scott shrugged. "Whatever it is, I mean to get to the bottom of it. Dr. Pitt must be found, and I don't intend that anyone else shall get the credit for something that belongs to us professors." The young man's eyes blazed. "I can't blame you," Nancy agreed. "Have you any clues to help solve the mystery?" "Yes, after Dr. Pitt disappeared, I found a couple of things in his tent that I believe are important. Here's one of them." He reached deep into a pocket of his top coat and brought out an object wrapped in tissue paper. It was the bottom of half of a large ancient key, black in color and of unusual luster. "There were 3 of these keys originally," he explained, "all made of obsidian." That's glass, isn't it?" Nancy asked. "Yes, a kind of volcanic glass," Terry Scott answered. The other keys disappeared when Dr. Pitt did." He held the curious half-key up to the light for Nancy's examination, then returned it to the pocket of his top coat. "We will need the other half of the key before we're through," he stated. "But in the meantime, I figured what we ought to do is find a man named Juzar Tino." "Why?" Nancy asked. Terry Scott said that he suspected the man and his wife being thieves. They had been working near the Mexican campsite for some time before the stone tablet had been found. The Timos passed themselves off as scientists, but my guess is they're fakers. The same night that Dr. Pitt, the Cypress Stone, and the keys disappeared, the Tinos vanished. You think Dr. Pitt went off with them? Nancy remarked. Either with them or after them. I believe if we can trace Juarez Tino and his wife, we'll find Dr. Pitt as well as solve our ancient mystery. Oh, I hope so, said Nancy. Did any of you make a copy of the cipher on the stone tablet? The young man shook his head ruefully. We found the tablet at the end of the day when we were tired. We never thought it might be stolen before morning. Suddenly, Terry Scott glanced at his wristwatch. I almost forgot, he exclaimed. I promised Dr. Graham I'd phone him. The old man gets very upset if he's kept waiting. Excuse me for a moment, please. Leaving his coat at Nancy's side, Terry Scott dashed off to the telephone booth. Around the corner, Nancy waited, pondering the event she had related. A dark, swarthy man sauntered over and took Scott's place on the bench. Out of the corner of her eye, Nancy saw the man fingering the professor's top coat. What are you doing? She cried, jumping and snatching the coat from him. The man stood up hastily and hurried toward a side door. Just as he disappeared, Terry Scott returned. He noticed Nancy's look of oppression. Is something wrong? He asked anxiously. I'm not sure, Nancy said. A man who came to sit here acted as if he wanted to steal your coat. A frown came over the young professor's face. What did the man look like? Dark, short, she replied, sort of crooked mouth and beady eyes. That sounds like Juarez Tino, the man I was telling you about. Terry Scott snatched up his coat and plunged a hand into the inner pocket. It's gone, he gasped. Juarez has the black key. We'll go after him. Nancy rushed for the door through which the man had gone. Terry dashed after her. As they hailed a policeman, Nancy recognized a Sergeant Malley of River Heights Police Force. Sergeant, she asked excitedly, did you see a short, dark man come out of the waiting room? You mean the one that was running, Miss Drew? He just drove off in a blue sedan with another fellow. Mallow waved toward a department car. He's a thief. We must stop him. The policeman and Terry Scott followed Nancy as she reached for her car. The two men piled in beside her and they sped off. Nancy drove northward along the main highway toward River Heights and at last came close enough to note that the sedan ahead had a Florida license plate. Then, at a busy intersection, she was stopped by a traffic light and lost sight of the other car. Keep pushing, Malloy directed her when the light changed. They're up ahead someplace. A few minutes later, Terry Scott pointed excitedly. They just passed us, going the other way. They're heading back to the airport. Nancy maneuvered her car in a neat U-turn and took up the chase again. The sedan was well ahead, but Nancy kept gaining. Another quarter of the mile, they would overtake Juarez Tino, and just as she approached the far side of the airfield, the blue sedan suddenly swerved from the road, swaying dizzily. It swung across a rough field and onto the runway. Nancy started to follow, then jammed on her brakes, her car in the path of an oncoming plane. There'll be a crash, Nancy cried out. And that is the end of Chapter 1, An Urgent Request. See you on Chapter 2, A Suspect Escapes.